Greetings! Today I want to talk about the two main reasons I think Drain expertise is significantly worse than Control expertise and what can be done about it to make it better or at least make it more appealing to players so they'll actually use it. At first glance, you might think they're pretty similar. They're both right next to each other on the skill tree, and they both seem to offer a comparable benefit to the player, but upon further inspection, Control is just way better. So before we get into the reasons why it's better and why Drain doesn't get used very much, let me catch you up to speed in case you don't know what these two skills in particular do. Drain expertise increases the potency of all of your abilities, could be bridge officer abilities, console clickies, whatever, that drain subsystem power or shields from the target, and it also increases your resistance to those types of effects being applied to you. Control expertise is much the same way. It increases the potency of all of your control abilities that either hinder a target's movement speed or relocate them in the case of gravity well or something like that, and it increases your resistance to control effects that are being used on you. What's the problem? Drain abilities are just inherently less useful in this game than control abilities. Some of this is just baked into the way the game works with DPS, and some of it is due to some design choices that could be changed to make it a little bit more appealing. So the first thing to keep in mind is that this game is all about killing other things, either big groups of things with AoE damage or gunning down really big high health targets. You're talking about draining someone's subsystem power. That is disabling them in some way. It's reducing their effectiveness, but it isn't actually damaging them. Draining their shields is pretty good, but we have other ways of taking shields offline. So Drain expertise isn't doing a whole lot for you in a combat scenario. When it comes to control expertise, that affects your ability to group targets up, which does have a big impact on your performance. Not because the abilities themselves are doing a lot of damage, but because there's a lot of short radius AoE damaging abilities in the game. And so if you can clump targets up into a small radius and then use mines or any ability that does AoE damage, it's going to hit more targets and it's going to act as a damage multiplier. Then you have to take into consideration that some of the biggest areas where drain resistance would be useful to players aren't really a problem, or drain expertise doesn't fix it. So the big one that comes to mind is weapon power drain. Anytime you have energy weapons and you fire them, they reduce your weapon power. And that's significant because weapon power also determines the final damage multiplier you're going to get for your energy weapons. The way that they intend for you to deal with this is with electroplasma flow, or EPS, so that the power comes back after it's been drained quicker. But drain resistance from drain expertise does not reduce the amount of weapon power that is removed when you fire a weapon, so it's not any good for that. And then when you have other things like the phase space membrane console, which gives you a huge amount of kinetic damage over a period of time but rapidly drains your aux power, it's not too useful there either because you can just use a couple of batteries and get the maximum duration out of it. So in all of the cases where you'd want drain expertise to help you out offensively, it's not as good as control expertise. And all the places that you would really want the drain resistance to help you out, it's not too useful there either. Okay, reason number 2 is that there are massive synergies that come with control expertise that you just don't get with drain expertise. I am going to go over the big one in the plus column for drain expertise first, and that is deteriorating secondary deflectors. Of all the different kinds of secondary deflector, deteriorating secondary deflectors do the most damage by far. And if you look at the list of all the abilities that will trigger a deteriorating secondary deflector, most of them are drain abilities and not control abilities. So that is something it has going for it, but typically people will just use a bunch of control abilities and mix in maybe one drain ability just to trigger the deflector, and that's about it. Plus there are other abilities that aren't control or drain that can trigger it as well. You're probably going to use one of those instead. So it doesn't really end up being a big boon for drain abilities the way you think it would. But then you compare that to to what control gets, and it's absolutely crazy. So, and I'm going to show you a tractor beam here that's been juiced up with a bunch of starship traits and personal space traits, and you can get so much out of this ensign level ability. It's absolutely crazy, and there is nothing comparable to that on the drain side. There's no drain ability that's going to be able to give you all this stuff. One tractor beam, just for being a control ability, can give you Cat 1 projectile, Cat 1 exotic, Cat 1 energy weapon, firing cycle haste, and hull regeneration. Then on top of that, other traits can give transport torpedo warhead to your pets. It can strip shields offline. It can give you 3 high-yield torpedoes that can create isolated tears. It can do so much crazy stuff, and it's just absolutely leagues and leagues above anything you're going to get with drain or drain expertise. And like I was saying earlier, when it does come time to use drain expertise, having more of the actual expertise skill usually doesn't improve any of the things you're actually using it for. There is one other exception to that. Drain expertise will increase the duration of subsystem offline, but it rarely increases the chance that it will go offline. So if you're using something like opening salvo, drain expertise can increase the duration that it's offline. It does see a little bit of use here or there, but it's very niche and definitely nothing compared to what you get with extra control expertise, where you want just about as much as you can get, I think. And I try to stack as much control expertise on all of my builds that I can, just for all of these crazy synergies. It's also really easy to get extra control expertise in a way that it's not for Drain X. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of ways to get drain expertise onto your ship. There's lots of consoles and stuff you can use, but it just seems like for the sort of baseline stuff that everyone wants, things like the assimilated module or the bioneural infusion circuits, a lot of these sort of staple items just happen to have control expertise on them, which is giving you an extra way to get it. And then you look at a trait like Fragment of AI Tech, it's giving you a little bit of control expertise on top as well. So you just sort of get these little incidental amounts of control expertise, whether you were looking for it or not. And I find that that's really never the case for Drain X. Unless I go out of my way to put something with drain expertise on my ship, I usually have 0. How do we fix this? Well, if the two problems are that drain expertise is inherently less valuable than control and that it has worse synergies, then those are the two things we can focus on. So the first step is to make drain just better in general regardless of the synergies. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to look at the tactical bridge officer abilities that target subsystems. Because at the ensign level especially, you have 4 of them, 1 for each subsystem. You can target auxiliary, engines, weapons, and shields, but because then they're considered a firing mode, you can't use them along with other energy weapon firing modes, and that is a huge deterrent to anyone wanting to use them. They do drain though, so if we were to say that you can get rid of that and that you would be able to use those abilities at the same time as other firing modes, which is not unheard of. Suppression barrage can be used along with fire at will, so I don't see any reason why they couldn't do that. That would be step 1. Step 2 is to make the process of draining subsystem power just better. So what you do there is you say, these are just some examples, just my suggestions, maybe not take it up on it, but each one of these effects would scale off of drain expertise, and I think you'd want to make it so that you get more effect out of higher drain X than lower to encourage people to actually stack it on their builds. So if you're draining shields, you'll have an increasing chance of knocking the shields offline instead of just increasing the duration that it's offline. If you're draining aux power, then you could give a damage resistance debuff. If you're draining engines, you could have an increasing chance to have a hold so that they're held in place. That's very useful. There's not a lot of on-demand holds in the game, and the Tholian Web Spinner Array console, which was a free event reward, gives you bonus damage. It will help with the synergies. We haven't gotten to that part yet, but being able to have a hold for draining engine power, I think, would be good as well. And then, of course, if you're draining weapon power, you would have it reduce their outgoing damage. So you get these nice effects that scale with the amount of drain expertise you have, anytime you're using a drain effect or ability or bridge officer that drains that kind of subsystem. That's how we fix drain expertise offensively. How do we fix drain expertise defensively in terms of drain resistance? I think they should just allow a small amount. Maybe you don't get that much even with a lot of drain expertise, but some amount of drain expertise should reduce the amount that your weapons drain from your weapon power. I think people would be a lot more likely to put some drain expertise on their ship if they knew it was going to give them more weapon power and allow them to have a greater amount of final damage multiplier. Okay, so that takes care of the inherent problems with drain expertise. What about the synergies? That's a bit difficult because not having those synergies means we need new stuff. And I don't want them to just put a couple of things into a promo ship trait or whatever. We need stuff that they could add. If they wanted to, they could add new stuff to the Phoenix boxes. They could add new stuff to fleet stores. They could add new stuff to reputations. There's no reason they couldn't go back, for example, the Omega rep store, and just add something new in there. Why not? They could do it. Maybe the next console they give out, or one in the future and down the pipeline, could give a bunch of drain expertise as a passive, and then maybe it would have another passive on it that says, scaling off of your drain expertise, blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't have to be consoles either. It could be, maybe give us an experimental weapon. The Soliton Wave Impeller scales off of your engine power, and it's one of the best experimental weapons in the game. Give us an experimental weapon that scales off of Drain X and hits really, really hard. Maybe that would be another way to do it. There are some synergies already. I'm making it sound like there aren't any. It's just that the ones we have aren't any good. They're nowhere near as good as the control ones. Anyway, those are my suggestions for ways to improve drain expertise to make it competitive with control expertise. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys think drain expertise is in a great spot and it doesn't need any help. Or maybe you have some really great ideas that I didn't think of. Either way, let me know in the comments. Take care of yourselves as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.